Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Conversations with GOG. I'm Linda Johnson, co-founder and president of Go On Girl Book Club. 2021 marks our 30th year as an organization of members that read and support authors from the African diaspora. This series of conversations with authors as well as people in the book publishing industry, from editors to booksellers, has been developed to connect us with the art of writing and the inner workings of the book publishing industry. Go On Girl Book Club is a literary sisterhood of dedicated book-loving and reading women in 51 chapters in 16 states and 40 cities who read a variety of genres written by Black authors. Today and this entire month, our conversations focus on women for Women's History Month. We kick it off with Alice Randall's historical fiction novel, Black Bottom Saints. Today's Go On Girl co-hosts are Julia Chance from our New York 1 chapter and Renee Washington from Alabama 1. I will now turn it over to Julia.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our conversation with Alice Randall. We're very excited to have her here today as we talk about Black Bottom Saints. To get us in the mood, well, first I'm going to read to you about Alice. Alice Randall is a New York Times best-selling novelist, award-winning songwriter, educator, and food activist. A graduate of Harvard University, she holds an honorary doctorate from Fisk University, is on the faculty at Vanderbilt University, and credits Detroit's Ziggy Johnson School of the Theater with being the most influential educational institution in her life. She is widely recognized as being one of the most significant voices in 21st century African American fiction. Randall has presented across the nation in auditoriums, libraries, museums and ballrooms, in fields, in graveyards, and harborside. She once did a talk for a group of students as they marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. In all those spaces, she weaves history, literature, practical wisdom, and political passion into powerful exchanges with large and small audiences. She covers expected territory in unexpected ways and makes expected territory accessible. Her most frequent topics include fiction, fiction writing, and literary theory, soul food cookbooks, Black foodways, and Black cocktail culture, Black presence and influence in country music, country lyric and American culture, and country music through a feminist lens. She is known for integrating cooking demonstrations, food tastings, and even pop-up hula hooping sessions into her talks. Randall's fiction has been or is currently being taught at a wide range of universities, including Fisk, Harvard, Iowa State, Penn State, Philander Smith, Princeton, Tuskegee, the University of Texas, Austin, the University of Virginia, and Wesleyan. We're going to have a lot of fun talking to Alice, and I ask that you put your questions in the chat.
No, not the chat.
I'm sorry, in the Q&A. Put your questions in the Q&A. Put your comments in the chat. And I'm going to introduce Alice. Alice, welcome.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be with you.
So I'm going to give a little information about Black Bottom Saints, and then I'm going to have you read your portion of the book describing Black Bottom. Black Bottom Saints spotlights Detroit but also shouts out to Harlem, Chicago, New Orleans, Philadelphia, Central Avenue in Los Angeles, Beale Street in Memphis, and Jefferson Street in Nashville, among others. It encompasses Black-owned and operated institutions, from nightclubs to hospitals and eating establishments. Black media also is recognized and celebrated. This is an entity whose importance as a chronicler of the African-American experience has also not gotten its due in mainstream media. Her newest magical character is Joseph Ziggy Johnson. His writing as a gossip columnist for the Michigan Chronicle and additional job as MC at the city's prime night spot has made him a prime mover throughout the community. He's seen all the greats for decades and also observed huge changes in his neighborhood, Black Bottom. But Johnson hasn't settled simply for recording the exploits of others. He's built his own monument to cultural continuity, creating and serving as dean of the Ziggy Johnson School of Theater. He's had a phenomenal life, one that's paralleled and consistent brilliance of African-American creative expression. But no one lives forever, and Ziggy Johnson's time is rapidly ending. While coming to grips with his demise, lying in Black-owned and operated Kirkwood Hospital, Johnson takes time to reflect and remember his life's triumphs and failures. He also recalls influences, mentors, friends, lovers. He decides to make a list of all he calls Black Bottom's 52 saints. Some are legendary figures, well known by even those with, or some are just, even those with just the casual or passing knowledge of Black music and history. Others are local favorites whose value is no less vital. These saints have repeatedly enriched and inspired generations of listeners around the world while extending and expanding the traditions and legacy of Black performers. As one might expect, Ziggy's way of paying homage to these greats is a distinctive one. He does it through special cocktails. These drinks epitomize each saint's uniqueness while symbolizing the totality of Black greatness. So Alice, would you read to us about Black Bottom?
Yes, Julia. And again, I am so thankful to be on this Zoom with one of the most historic and significant book clubs, not just in America, in the world. I'm really moved by this. This is a little inset fictional column by the fictional Ziggy Johnson. The real Ziggy's column was called Zagging with Ziggy. The fictional Ziggy's column is called Zipping with Ziggy. Last Saturday, two of my best students at the ZJ school asked me to settle an argument. One chap insisted Black Bottom was a real place like Indianapolis. The other one insisted it was made up like the North Pole. I said they were both right and both wrong. Black Bottom was a real place in the state of Michigan. Now Black Bottom is a state of mind. My medic pals rattle off certain specific streets, Hastings Street, St. Antoine Street, and north-south boundaries. My friends in the labor movement, attentive to competing constituencies, note that what many are remembering as Black Bottom was once two distinct neighborhoods, Black Bottom and just north of it, Paradise Valley. My showbiz folk insist, I don't care what the map says or the taxi drivers say. If you're standing in the lobby of the Paradise Theater or the Gotham Hotel, you are in Black Bottom. George Stanley says, don't talk about Black Bottom and not include Shane Street, where the original Stanley dry cleaner stood, on a block between a Polish bake shop and a jewelry store, a city mile to one of Mr. Ford's factories. My favorite school mom, Shirley McNeil, PhD, says, Zig, you can't say what Black Bottom is unless you say what year you're talking about. If you're talking 1850, it's farmland with fertile Black soil that gave the neighborhood its name. If you're talking 1900, it's Jewish people come over from Eastern Europe and Russia, and Irish folk, and some of us. Now, if you're talking 1920 or later, it's us, lusciously us. And after 1964, it's gone, gone, gone. Old folks like to say that Black Bottom stank in the summer and froze in the winter, but don't mind that. Down by the riverside, 2, 3, 4 families crowded in a wooden house with rent paid by factory jobs. We feasted on opportunity and hope. Young guns claim Black Bottom is paved over, long gone, and don't matter. I love me some doctor men, but on the definition of Black Bottom, I side with my lawyer, Lawrence Massey. Black Bottom ain't a place. Black Bottom, an attitude, a Detroit attitude. Then Ziggy gets out of the column and gets back into his profile. Yes, Massey got to the champion heart of the matter. Black Bottom is a defiant, inventive, modern swagger that had everything to do with being efficient, exact, ambitious, proud, and Black. The efficient and exact part comes from the assembly lines. The inventive part comes from the breadwinners too. We didn't get credit for all we invented in the factories, from processes and tools to paint colors, but we invented in the factory. In Black Bottom, we celebrated what we invented as loud as we celebrated what we built, and we celebrate what we finna do loudest. Straight up from Alabama, you might walk down Hastings streets and ask, what you know good, son? Spend a year on Hastings Street, you learn to ask the harder, sharper, sepia Detroit question, what's new? And when you become a citizen of Black Bottom, your greeting will be, what I need to know to do what I want to do. Black Bottom is walking tall, chin up, fist ball, brain firing on all cylinders. Black Bottom folk got steel in their spine, steel in their jaws, and steel in their will. But it wasn't always an attitude. Before it was raised, it was a place.
Thank you, Alice. To me, Black Bottom Saints is a love letter to not only Black Detroit of a certain era, but also to mid-20th century Black American culture. When I was reading it, I felt like it was the epitome of there's no one way to be Black. It reflects, it highlights all the many ways we were, we are, our many interests, all the things we say and do, what's expected, what's not expected, how we got over, how we survived, and how we made a way for ourselves. So that's the mythic Black Bottom. Now tell us about the actual Black Bottom in your home city of Detroit.
Well, as you captured in that passage, it was a neighborhood down by the river that was an epicenter of Black arts, activism, athletics, and industry. It was a neighborhood just most intimately, my two grandmothers, my mother's mother died on Hastings Street in Black Bottom, and my father's mother worked in a dry cleaners the family owned on Shane Street in Black Bottom, and had a son and a granddaughter die in a house fire in Black Bottom. Black Bottom is where my family roots run to.
Okay. And what led you to write this book?
You know, my first novel was published in 2001. It was The Wind Done Gone. And this is my fifth novel. All since I published that first one in 2000, people will always ask you, who inspired you to want to be a writer? And then people who got to know me, because I had a somewhat very abusive mother, would ask me, how did you get to be so happy from where you were? And those two questions came up a lot. And I realized the answer to both of them was Ziggy Johnson. That Ziggy Johnson had inspired me to want to be a writer when I was 3 years old. That I used to say for a long time that it was Zora Neale Hurston, but I wanted to be a writer since I was 3, and I didn't know Zora Neale Hurston when I was 3 years old. I knew Ziggy. And when I look back on my life, what it made the difference in my life with Ziggy and my daddy had taught me to spot the hard one happy. That Ziggy had put all these, I had gone to Ziggy's dancing school, and he had put all these stories of Night Train Lane having one mother that put him out in the trash, wrapped in newspaper. And Ella Lane, who walked through the alley, thought she heard a cat that needed to be put out of its misery, and found a little baby boy and raised him as her own. But the important part of the story is that Night Train always thought about focused on the mother who lifted him out of the trash, not the one who put him in. And that story, those stories sustained me in my hardest days. I used to say, the slogan of the city of Detroit is "We should rise from the ashes." One of the things, this is Women's History Month, and there are quite a number of these saints are women. But Ziggy himself is very gender nonconforming. And one of the complicated things when you read this whole book is you will realize in some ways, for the central female character of the book, Colored Girl, Ziggy and George function as two mamas in certain ways.
Yes, Colored Girl is the other character in the book. Speak a little bit about her and what, so Ziggy's on his deathbed and he's got to get this book out. So, and in comes Colored Girl.
Yes, well, Ziggy is on his deathbed. This is in the last days of 67, right after the Detroit Rebellion, first days of 68. And a little girl that he knows and cares about from his school has been kidnapped by her mother and moved away. And he is thinking about everything she is losing and everything she's going through, having been kidnapped by her mother. And so he is pulling together all the stories he thinks she will one day need to save herself and to know what her place was, where she came from.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of why Ziggy is writing this. And to say about Black Bottom, at that time, there are 14 Black-owned hospitals in Detroit.
14?
14. Kerwood was just one of them. This will tell you something about Black Detroit we don't know. So Colored Girl, you know, she works in the novel, and I know you're a very sophisticated book group. She, ironically, you know, there's the everyman she's the every person, and it's a Black female youth. So she is every person who ever has had to walk from trauma to transcendence. But she's also a very particular Black girl born in Black Detroit in 1959, you know, this character. And, but she's a child whose life Ziggy wants to save from the grave.
I want to let all of our attendees know that we have contests that we're going to do throughout the discussion, and we'll put the questions in the chat, and you will go to a site and put in your answer, and one of the prizes is a Black Bottom Saints book. This is my edition that's all stickied up, and we are also going to give away some of the cocktails that are featured in the book, the Saints cocktails. Talk about those libations.
Ooh, I love that. Well, because the main themes of this novel are love is the strut and hate is the stumble and joy is radical. But this novel deals a lot about the movement from trauma to transcendence, and particularly both race-based trauma and sex-based trauma. This is Women's History Month. I know it's a Saturday night, but we've got to notice that trauma is woven into the fabric of the founding. Of the 56 people who signed the Declaration of Independence, 41 of them owned slaves. And quite a number of them not only owned and worked slaves, they raped slaves, enslaved African women. So trauma is woven into the fabric of the founding, but this book is about moving from trauma to transcendence. Because joy is radical, and the book has as its theme, love is the strut and hate is the stumble. Each chapter ends with a libation, which is a 5-sense address to joy. The sight, the sound, the scent, the touch. Sight, sound, scent, touch, taste of joy. Some have alcohol, some don't, but they all are 5 sense addressed to joy. They also are this other thing that I think is so important and so my Black Bottom. Cocktails are art that's not recognized as art. And two of the greatest people in American and global cocktail culture are Thomas Bullock, a Black bartender who published his first book in about 1917, and Bricktop, a Black woman born in West Virginia who opened one bar in Paris about 1924, another in Rome, and then later a bar in Mexico City. Bricktop is arguably the most important barkeep in the history of the world. Jimmy Baldwin going to her places, F. Scott Fitzgerald going to her Paris saloon. But she wasn't just shaking up culture. And Bullock wasn't just shaking up libations, inebriation. They were shaking up taste narratives, visual metaphors and taste metaphors. They were creating art that wasn't recognized as art. So one of the things I want to celebrate are all the Black artists creating art that isn't even recognized as art. And there's really no way to do that better than with a cocktail and the food art. Because in Slavery and Freedom, Black people have created art, particularly food and libation-based art that wasn't recognized as art.
So what Alice does in Black Bottom Saints is it's created like a saints book or a book of saints. So there are 52 saints, and each of the saints has a description of what they oversee, and then a cocktail at the end. So one saint is Nat King Cole. Now, Nat King Cole isn't from Detroit. And just because you're a Black Bottom Saint doesn't mean you have to be from Detroit. But you passed through Detroit, you left a lingering impression on Black Detroit. So Nat King Cole is the patron saint of the woke and wise and addicts. What does that mean?
Well, that is so interesting. The woke and wise, Nat King Cole's story as told by Ziggy in this book is a story of Nat King Cole feeling betrayed when his audience came away from him, not understanding how he was trying to act as a civil rights activist. And when people were breaking his records in Detroit and not understanding what he was trying to do, as he tells the story of how he was trying to out how virulent racism was, and it got misunderstood what he was trying to do. So that's the important thing, is the wise part of that, to see into the complexities. And what I say about addicts is Nat King Cole fought through the pain of being misunderstood, through the pain of being despised by both sides sometimes, while still holding onto his art and still bringing his genius. He went some dark places to escape. And so he's someone you can call on, because he came out, and he came out for his people, and he came out for his art, he came out for his own genius.
Okay. Would you read the passage about Robert Hayden?
Libation. That I will. I love Robert Hayden is the first saint in the book.
And tell us a little bit about who Robert Hayden is.
Well, Robert Hayden was born in Black Bottom. He becomes the first Black poet laureate of the United States. And I think that's as much as I will tell you about him right now.
Okay.
If he had a mother, Sue Hayden, who had been born a slave in the last days of the Civil War. She had whispered to him stories of enslaved Africans in America who grew wings and flew home. Dark men who knew all the stars of Africa. Yes, on the last day of my last summer, in August 1967, I drank to Robert Hayden, thinking about love's austere rituals and all the times I swept the dancing school floor at 7 a.m. so my girls would have clean shoes. Libation for the feast day of Robert Hayden. I knew all the stars of Africa. A riff on Tom Bullock's gin and calamus. Calamus was a particular favorite food of Walt Whitman's. He even named an entire section of leaves of grass after the plant. The Black hippies down in Detroit's Plum Street, according to Hippy Dippy, say, calamus lets them fly. It became illegal to ingest calamus in the United States in 1969. Ginger root makes a fine substitute. A piece of ginger about the size of your thumb. A good bottle of gin. Pour out 1 shot of gin and drink. Add the peeled ginger to the bottle. Cap tightly and refrigerate for 3 days. Strain, chill, serve chill straight up. Sea stars. I knew all the stars of Africa. And that calls out to the people we forget, the Black hippies down on Plum Street. I love that all these different ways of calling into Blackness, because there's nothing more opposite than a Black hippie than Robert Hayden.
Well, I'm going to call into Blackness with the first question of several contests tonight. Okay, this is the question, and Renee Washington is going to put it in the chat. This Black Bottom Saint and heavyweight boxing champion's most famous bouts were as political as they were thrilling. Detroit has honored him with a statue, a greenway in his name, and a monumental public artwork titled The Fist. Who is he? So if you go into the chat, the question will be there and you'll get a link to Kahoot where you can click on and play. Do we have the Kahoot link in the, yeah, there it is. Remember, don't put your answer in the chat. Go to Kahoot. Alice, would you talk a little bit about the Mixologist Collective that you got to create these cocktails for your book?
Yes, they are the Double Strained Collective, and they are named for W.E.B. Du Bois Double Consciousness, and they are an African-American collective in Detroit of people in the bar industry. And they both advocate for their art, and they also advocate for rights for themselves and support during the whole, the difficult COVID challenge. But they are a brilliant group of bartenders, Black and brown bartenders. And I so appreciate that they have created videos. We commissioned them to create videos, one for each book that have not been shared yet. And I have a feeling that some lucky winners today are going to get to have access to perhaps a video or two.
Yes, they are. So this first question that I asked was to win the book, Black Bottom Saints. And this is, well, I'll hold it up later when the game is off the screen. Alice, when you went to Ziggy Johnson's school, what kinds of things did you learn there? What did you take? Ballet, tap dance?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I wanted to take tap, but that there was some gender bias in a part of my family, not in the Ziggy school, because there were some girls. And so I was pushed into the ballet class. And what I learned was resilience. I didn't learn, I never became a great dancer, but no, I'm credited with being the first Black woman to write a #1 country song. And I do have pictures of myself in a little cowgirl outfit, so I think Ziggy introduced me to the concept of even the Black cowgirl. And so, and certainly I learned about people like Lil Hardin Armstrong, who would actually play on early country records and never get the credit, so.
What was the name of your song? What is the name of your?
X's and O's, An American Girl. And one of the things I love about it, it has this line in it: she's got her God and she's got good wine, Aretha Franklin and Patsy Cline. She's an American girl.
Tell me the name of it again.
It's called X's and O's, An American Girl. But Aretha Franklin loved it. And I know personally, she invited me to be backstage with her at the Ryman when she played in Nashville just a couple of years before she was born. And it is, she was thrilled that I had put her in a line about what had become a country classic.
Okay, that's great. How long did it take you to do your research for this book?
Well, this book actually took me 7 years of hard research on this book. It took me 10 years total to write it, 6 to 7 years of research, 3 to 4 years of writing. I originally it started off with microfilm. When I first started working on this book, the Michigan Chronicle. Ziggy's paper was not digitized. It recently, in the last year, has gotten digitized and available. But when I started working, the historical paper wasn't. So it took a couple of summers in the basement scrolling through microfilm. First, I had to find these 17 copies of the microfilm that had ever been made back in the late 60s, early 70s of the paper. And then I had to scroll through them to find Ziggy's columns because people weren't really remembering them. He wasn't famous as a columnist. It took me essentially 2 summers to print up 1,000 columns, one at a time, over a 20-year period of his writing. Then I had to chase down, read them, and chase down the lives that seemed most important to him. And that was about 100 and some people that I initially was looking into. I used historical other newspapers, Black newspapers. I used legal records, tax records. I used Ancestry.com. I did interviews. I chased down these people in various ways. Then I started creating fictional characters. This is a novel. It's a work of fiction, of historical fiction. It's not a history book. There's some wonderful Detroit histories. I love Herb Boyd's Black Detroit. I love Tia Miles' book. But this is a fiction. It's about the interior life of Ziggy, a fictional Ziggy Johnson and a fictional colored girl. And so I began weaving the story of what Ziggy loved about each of these people and how he would offer them to colored girl. And so that was another 3 to 4 year period of writing and rewrite. Initially, I was writing it as a year in the life of Ziggy Johnson. And then only later did I decide to really focus on who Ziggy loved.
Okay.
Write the individual lives and to define him by the people. To be a Black Bottom Saint, you have to do 3 things: have walked through the lobby of the Gotham Hotel, which Langston Hughes said was the greatest Black hotel in the world, and it was in Detroit, and Ziggy lived there. Ziggy had to love you, as indicated that he had put you in one of his columns and put you before the lives of his girls. And 3, you had to know something significant about moving from trauma to transcendence.
Okay. I think we have a winner. The winner is Kef. No, I'm not sure who that is. KD is the winner. There's the winner.
Oh, okay, yeah, we had names popping up. Yes, KD.
Okay. KD is the winner. So KD has to contact the panelists through chat with.
I think it's and I'm going to say your name wrong, Katwisia Deslarue. So I hope I got close. KD.
Okay. And reach out to us with your email address and we'll get your information to send you a book. So congratulations. Alice, what is historical fiction and where does the truth end and fiction begin?
It's a great question. With historical fiction, you're shining a light on the past. I like to say in some simple ways, remember I told you I had one grandmother who died on Hastings Street and another who had worked and had a child and a grandchild die on Shane. Their art is when you take their blood, sweat, and tears and you turn it to beauty and joy, to some light. You turn it into a monument of those women. So you're taking facts and you are transforming them with alchemy into a light, into a new reality that sheds light on the history. I like to think with this book that I'm a jazz player and that all my readers are improvising with me and they are riffing on the stories. They will investigate them in different ways. They will vote some saints off the island and vote some in. And there's an invitation in the book to do that. This is a feminine, feminist approach. I am not saying this is the story. I am saying these are stories. And I'm inviting everyone else's story in. I'm inviting palimpsest. This to me is part of a feminine and feminist approach. I definitely locate myself in the Angela Davis sense into being a blues novelist, and that I am interested in all Black lives. And I'm interested particularly in centering my stories on girls and women and the importance of girls and women.
And Ziggy thought girls and women were important too. We talked about you reading 2 more passages. I'm not sure that we're going to have time, but either the passage, number 3 or number 4, the one at the end of the book. I like the one that describes the youth colossal.
Great. I think that is the one that, are you thinking page 352 to 350, that one? Is that what you're thinking?
I was thinking page 4.
Oh, page 4. Okay, great. Thinking they both touch on it. I'm happy to be on page 4. This is really about audience. And all Black Detroit audiences were fire. They brought a rare light and a heat that rated Black achievement and performance by a Black yardstick. It was nothing unusual for a breadwinner or a breadwinner's wife to go to 52 shows a year. It was unusual but not rare to go to 150 shows a year. Some breadwinners went to over 250 shows in a given year. The breadwinners heard so much excellent music, they became experts. And the more expert they became, the more everybody wanted to play Detroit. It was a self-perpetuating cauldron, sepia excellence. I stirred that pot. I wanted to do something for the breadwinners' children because the breadwinners had done so much for Detroit, and there's nothing a breadwinner loves more than a breadwinner's baby. I taught the breadwinners' babies, and I did not teach them to be dancers. Week after week, hiding behind practicing new steps and learning sophisticated choreography, I shared stories that put a limelight on the Black Bottom Saints, people who had suffered so much and so differently, but had each found a way or made a way to experience radical joy. In my classes, I dropped bits and pieces about the Saint lives like breadcrumbs that marked a path out of the automobile plant for the breadwinners' children. I did this to celebrate and honor what the breadwinners did outside the factory. Make worthy and beautiful babies and be worthy and beautiful, their sometimes damn selves. And once a year, always on Father's Day, my School of the Theater presents the extravagant recital Black Detroit calls Youth Colossal at the legendary Latin Quarter Lounge. On that day, there are no white faces in the Latin Quarter, none. They're just our children on the stage, and everybody in the audience looking at our boys and our girls has the same thoughts. He is the second coming of Christ. She is the next Virgin Mary, and Lord, don't all the bronze apostles look good? Youth, the 7 most radical words in the Bible, and a little child shall lead them. From the day it opened in 1952, the Ziggy Johnson School of the Theater was a citizenship school. I did not run a dancing school. We were rehearsing for the theater of life. I'd seen Butterbeans and the little genius Sammy Davis perform. I well knew we don't need a school to learn to dance. Even from jump, it was my education to educate boys and girls to be dangerous citizens. By the time we were open for a few years, I was focusing on the girls. In Detroit, the boys and the men were doing okay, or so at least I thought. The girls had it harder. I've known too many young, brilliant, precise women with heads for numbers who never considered attending medical school, never gave 2 shakes from a Harrier Howard. And I've known women who could argue the paint up a wall, who didn't dream of law. I've seen girls who got raped, blamed themselves, not the man, then got talked into thinking sex was evil and they were dirty. And I've also seen women driving Cadillac cars wearing furs who've never voted. That's what I set out to change at the Ziggy Johnson School of the Theater. Autonomy, ambition, renewal, pride, and creativity are the 5 basic positions we teach.
Yes. Okay, we're going to go with our second question. The prize for this is one of the cocktails, one of the libations. And the question is, long before her numerous appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show or her angelic turn on primetime TV, this saint and singing daughter of a Detroit steelworker got her first big break at the famed Flame Show bar. Her name is, and Alice will keep chatting while people put their questions in, put their answers in. I put the questions in. How did you decide what cocktail would go with what person?
That it had to be an absolute metaphor of their life. For example, Della Reese, her cocktail is called The Last Lick.
Mm-hmm.
And people may not know this about her, but she was a domestic violence survivor, and she, in the novel, is presented as an anti-domestic violence activist. Her drink has a red wine wash over brown liquor. It looks like a bruise on black skin. It's meant to honor every woman who has survived domestic violence and every woman and person who stands with a woman to end domestic violence in that woman's life. So each of the drinks has something, tries to capture the spirit, the strength of that person in the chapter.
You also created all these ancillary things with this book. There's a Spotify playlist. There's a deck of playing cards. We have information about all of that in the chat. How did you think all of this up? Writing about 52 saints and actually counting Ziggy and Colored Girl.
There's 61 actually in total.
Oh, 61, okay.
Moms Mabley and Detroit Red, one of her loves, share a chapter. Butterbeans and Susie. So there's 61 saints. And there's a hidden saint, Eartha, because she doesn't want to be used. So she's not an actual saint. But she is a saint, and we love Eartha Kitt.
So how did you come up with all of these ancillary things, the Spotify lists, the cards, and now the cards are going to be sold in Detroit. They're going to become a Detroit souvenir, right? I just read in the Detroit Free Press. Tell us about that.
Well, we will be doing the cards. They're the saints that are in the book are the only saints on the cards. And we're so excited. What I love most about the card deck is what we're pushing is a game called Peace, Not War. The lower card wins. What I love about the card deck is it translates the novel for people who don't have great reading skills. It translates the novel visually so that we can address people at all different directions and levels. But the thing I'm really excited about of my ancillary things, we have a wonderful Black Bottom Saints museum that you can actually find now on the website. And it was created by a young woman, a Black woman in Nashville who literally was going into 9th grade, the summer of 8th grade. So it's essentially done by a 14-year-old girl, built out this amazing multi-dimensional Black Bottom Saints museum that you can go in and see all these saints and click on a painting and get who they're the patron saint of, a favorite quotation of. It's very exciting.
Yes, we have the link of the gallery, the museum, in our chat, so people can access that. Can they also go to your website and access it?
I think so. And I want to say the most important and sort of sweet thing about the Black Bottom Saints playing cards is they are done by extraordinary artist, Jimmy James Green. Yes. And Jimmy James Green is now in New York City, but he apprenticed and began some of his art career in Detroit, working under John Anye Lockhart. John Anye Lockhart actually portrait when I was a little girl in Detroit. He also painted my cousin's portrait. And then, and literally then Jimmy James Green would apprentice under him in Detroit and in Ann Arbor. And then one of my students would connect me to Jimmy James Green, having discovered his art.
Wow.
Isn't that exciting?
That's amazing.
So exciting.
And behind you is Jimmy James Green's picture. That's Ziggy.
Exactly. That is Ziggy. And it's so wonderful to collaborate with other artists. And it is wonderful to collaborate with other media. And it's something Ziggy would have absolutely loved. One of my favorite saints that we haven't had a chance to speak about is Artist Lane. Artist Lane is the only living saint. There's only one living saint, and it's Artist Lane. And President Biden has just chosen her Rosa Parks. It's in the Oval Office now. But President Barack Obama had put her Sojourner Truth sculpture back in the Capitol some years back, and that's actually in the novel. So Artist Lane is the only living Black bottom saint in my fictional universe, and it's just exciting.
Did you get to talk to Artist Lane when you were researching the book?
I did not talk to her when I was researching the book. I did get to talk to her since the book has been published, and she read it. So, and she loved it and said, this is the way it is. And so that was really wonderful. The chapter on Artist Lane, since she was a living person, is Ziggy's letter begging artists to paint more paintings. Because I told you, Ziggy lived in the Gotham Hotel that Langston Hughes said was the greatest hotel in the world, Women's History Month. Equally importantly, Maxine Powell lived in the Gotham Hotel. She is a woman who would create the charm school at Motown. She's known for that. What people don't know her for, and should and is celebrated in Black Bottom Saints, is Maxine Powell is a person who took on the big three auto companies, took on Ford, GM, Chrysler, and forced them to use Black models in the international car shows.
Yes.
She, and I say that in honor of you, Julia Chance, who's done so much important things on, in essence, on beauty aesthetics, that Maxine Powell, a Black woman who's not given credit for it, helped change international appreciation of Black beauty by getting the opportunity for models, brown and Black models in Detroit, to be at those car shows.
Right.
So I love finding these pieces of history.
Okay, we're waiting for a winner to come for our next question. It's coming up.
And then shining that light of art on it, because I am a novelist. I'm a fiction writer.
Do you think you'll always do historical fiction?
We know my
Like
very
Melvin?
first novel, When Done Gone, was historical fiction set in the antebellum period. It's also other things aside from that. So I haven't always, my fourth novel, Ada's Rules, was a diet book as a novel about a Black preacher's wife who had 100 pounds to lose. So what I have done, I'm interested in writing history because we have been so written out of history.
Yes.
One of the things that's wonderful about fiction, we can't necessarily, my grandfather couldn't read and write at all, literally, not at all. My grandmother could barely read and write. Neither of them had attended any school. So they didn't get to write their stories down. I would remember the words. So that's one of the ways I think that fiction in the Black world plays a very radical role of carrying forward the stories whispered in air, things that can't be proven, but that we have to honor. Because on my other side, my daughter's great-grandmother, I once was with her at a passport office and somebody was insisting she didn't exist because when she was born in Georgia, they didn't keep records of the births of rural Black girls.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody saying, because she didn't have this thing, she didn't exist. So I love that fiction is one of the ways that we can go at creating and sharing our ephemeral, our words in air experience, where so much of our soul selves get saved. That's what fiction can do.
I'm going to turn it over to our co-host, Renee Washington. But before I do, because there's so much that we'd like to share about your book, so much more that we have on the agenda. We have 2 more contest questions, and I'd like to show a little bit of the Saint cards. So I'm going to turn it over to Renee, and then At some point, we'll get in another 2 questions if we can, and also the Saint cards. Take it away, Renee.
Yeah. Yes. Hello, Alice Randall. This is such a rich conversation, and we do have some questions for you. There are a few questions about the inclusion of Michael Duggan as a saint. Do you want to speak to that?
He's not a saint. There are only 61 Black Bottom saints, and he is not a saint.
Yeah.
And he's not a saint in the deck of cards, and that's just, he is not.
Okay. Yeah, we had 3 questions on that, so I said, okay, I better ask that one. Okay, and we have another question about, I see this book as a wonderful social history of African Americans at the turn of the 20th century. There are a lot of characters that are a part of the LGBTQ community. Is there anything you want to say as to this inclusion?
I want to say that Ruth Charlotte Ellis was a pioneering queer rights activist and a Black woman who owned a printing press. And people, like, there are histories that say that the first sort of queer teenage center was in California at a much later date when Ruth Charlotte Ellis was doing this work. And again, that, you know, I knew that my experience in Detroit as a little girl when I was born, Valda Gray, that gender nonconforming people were part of the world and part of the people I love. And so it was just natural for me to include that, and also natural, I wanted to report on the fact that one in the Valda chapter, he even calls out Martin Luther King for pushing gay people, gay arrest off to the side, some of the people who brought them there. So this is, you know, this is a deep and complicated book. I love Martin Luther King, but Valda calls him out on that. And that's a thing to call him out on. But ultimately we call everybody in, because love is the strut and hate is the stumble. This is a book about joy being radical.
Oh yes, love that, love that. And I wanted to ask you this question because one of the things that I read in the book about Ziggy Johnson is that I loved how he taught the girls how to dance, and the essential thing that he said for learning to dance was, and he said this was for dance and life, is spotting. That's the trick that dancers use to spin through their turns, and that the key is to keep returning their head and eyes to a fixed, distant point, a chosen spot to increase the dancer's control and prevent dizziness. And so my question for you is, what's your fixed, distant point, your invisible point on the wall of life that keeps you grounded and centered?
One is that simple message about love, and that you can rise from the ashes, and that you make sane like you make a bed every day. I get up and I truly believe we can move to that transcendence, that we can get to the hard-won happy, and I go for it every day. It has not always been easy, but I go for it every day, and I have found it most days.
Yes, we can always come back to love. I love that. Yes, yes.
Joy is, and the other one is, joy is radical. Yeah. Somebody else said living well is the best revenge. I don't think in terms of revenge. I think is joy is radical. Oh, yes. Because joy, Black joy, is even more radical. That's what some people have not wanted us to have.
Yes, we're not supposed to have joy. That's so true.
I stand by Black girl magic. I said there, when I was born in 59, in 60, the census came, there were 128,808 Black girls in Detroit. Black girl magic runs straight to Detroit. So does Black boy joy. But Black girl magic really does. But I do want to share the wisdom for everybody. I want to center, you know, like the people talk about the Harlem Renaissance, and we all know Harlem doesn't just belong to people who live in New York. Particularly the Harlem Renaissance is such a mountaintop of Black art excellence. everybody who loves Black language anywhere on the planet needs to focus on it. Black Detroit, for me, I call it Caramel Camelot, is the same. This is my fictional world. In my fictional world, it has the same, actually eclipsing importance to Harlem's Renaissance or Bronzeville, because it was centered on blue collar, Black workers, the breadwinners who were that audience, defining art by their own yardstick and making their own money. I told you about artist Lane and John Lockhart. In a modest house, I've got pictures of my family long before John Lockhart was discovered by fancy people and the University of Michigan. Every day, Black people were paying him to paint their children, and that's how he made a living. That's the difference. That doesn't happen in New York like that.
Right.
So I love that. But I love that Detroit is so bright. It shines inspiration to everyone, to me.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm going to turn it back to Julia so we can finish the questions. And before I release it back to her, I must say, hello, Sister 1959. I too was born in 1959, so.
It was a very good year.
It was a wonderful year, yes. All right. Okay, and we have our second winner of the award is Pat Braxton. So yes. Do we want to go to the next question?
Yeah, go on to the next question. We have time for one more question. Let's see, and I will read it. So this is the second question. Known for her gorgeous gams and charismatic personality, this singing and dancing saint was once the reputed queen of Paris nightclubs. As an ardent social connector, she hobnobbed with jazz greats and royalty alike. She taught her friend Cole Porter the Charleston and befriended a struggling young poet named Langston Hughes. Who is she? All right.
While we're finishing this, I want to say I encourage readers to read this book radically, meaning you don't have to start on page 1 and read to the end. Go in wherever you want to go in. Make your own way. Go from the book out into the world. Make the cocktails, listen to music, but make your own, find your own adventure through it. The year begins on January 1st, but we don't all get born on January 1st. You don't meet everyone the day they're born. So the book works, and that's one of the reasons I created it in this fashion, so that it's a series of profiles, of fictional profiles, so that it can be eaten in short bites.
And I forgot to tell the last person who won, our second contestant, what you won is a cocktail named after Della Reese called The Last Lick. Della Reese is the patron saint of battered women, exceptional allies, and those who would be lucky. So cheers to that winner. Alice, what feeds you creatively? You have so much going on. You just wrote, you edited the food edition of, you told us earlier, I have it in the chat. Tell us about that.
What feeds me, number one, is shining a light on Black excellence and Black art and Black excellence. I've focused my whole life and career on that. I am so excited about all the kinds of Black artists and writers that I put forward and nurture. What feeds me personally is that 5 cents addressed to joy, whether it's in a cocktail or I love walking by the river. I love the Detroit Riverside when I was little. I love, but my river here in Nashville, I love the scent, the sound, the way I can see it changing. So I love that 5 cents addressed to joy. The other thing I love is friends and family and those actual connecting. I love lifting up the next generation. My whole thing is about old heads and new voices. I'm one of the old heads now. I'm 2.5 years out of a cancer diagnosis. And I feel so excited about the new voices coming and the wisdom of the old voices, that I love shining a light on Lynette Dobbins Taylor and figuring out all the things that she had to do. And she's dancing with Lyndon Johnson at an inaugural ball to try to help us get voting rights. And some people just see her dancing with Lyndon Johnson and they don't see what she's doing in Alabama to help us get voting rights, or knowing what happened when she was 14 years old, when she father drowned at a picnic on the 4th of July.
Oh.
So I love telling the complete story. I love finding the common cause. I love leading with love and shining art on other Black lives and Black art. Like Artist Lane.
When you sit down to write, when you sit down to do your books and your other writings, what are some must-have things you have to have around you, with you?
Black coffee and a keyboard. I drink lots and lots of black coffee. And I'm a little like Colette, who was an Afro-French writer who wrote from her bed, and I write from my bed. And so that's interesting. But the thing I love about writing is all you need is your imagination and a pencil. You can do it in your head. And that's what I love about art, that if you're in a very hard place, people who are, it can come in with you. That if you have some poems in your head, you can take that anywhere, any place. And I love those music that you have in your head. You can take it with you. And that's exciting to me. So I always play music while I'm writing too.
And who put your Spotify playlist together? That's an extensive playlist.
What's about 130 some songs?
Yes,
right?
it is.
Well, it was a lot of people, different people worked on that. But one person who did work on it was Carter Little. I worked on it extensively. We had a lot. That is a huge amount of work. And I think that it was very exciting to do that.
Okay, we have a winner for the third question, KJW, and what KJW will win is a cocktail called 66 Rue Pigalle. And it is the cocktail for Ada Bricktop Smith, who's the patron saint of fish out of water, aging with swagger, and audacious ambition. And I've taken her on to be my personal patron saint.
Yay.
Love that. So we're a book club, and you heard all about us in Linda's introduction. If you had a chapter of Go On Girl Book Club, who, past or present, would you invite to gather with you and discuss books?
Ooh. Ooh. Well, I would have to bring Zora up. And from the past, I think she deserves some really fun time with and seeing all the amazing readers that are out here that were not with her when she was writing, and her to be here so she could have seen how Barracoon was received. And I think that I would also want to, for those same reasons, invite those grandmothers of mine who didn't get a chance to learn to read and write, who could now hear these wonderful books on audiobook that they didn't get a chance to do back in those days. Present, one of the things that I enjoy is that I have so many women that I read books with right now. I'm in book clubs across the country. Reading and talking books is one of I never got to be in your amazing book club, but reading books with amazing women is something that I have been doing all of my life, first in school, but in book clubs. I love, so I couldn't pick any individual ones. And what I love actually is meeting new people that I don't know and hearing their ideas. Because I'm one of these people who invites all ideas to the table. I'm not a person who tries to shout down other voices. I want to bring in voices.
I'm going to ask our last question for another cocktail prize. So this is it. At Motown, this saint was a magician. She made plain pretty and pretty gorgeous and created the record label's legendary charm school. Say her name.
Are you asking me to give the
No,
answer?
no, I'm not. I'm asking our attendees to say her name. At Motown, this saint was a magician. She made plain pretty and pretty gorgeous and created the record label's legendary charm school. Who is she?
And when we say her name, I gotta bow my head down for Tanya Blanding, the saddest saint in my book.
Oh yes, tell us about Tanya Blanding.
Tanya Blanding was shot down in her own home in the summer of 1967. She weighed 40 pounds and she was 4 years old. So one of the things I'm calling in this book is that to have people understand why Say Her Name is so important, why Black Lives Matter is so important, how long we have been waiting for justice. My book calls out to that clear and loud. And it also, the Saints of Fall, the book, it starts in summer. The Saints of Summer, I said, are the roots of Black experience. Fall are the ones who remind us that structural obstacles, structural racism, structural sexism can't be overcome by individual excellence, cannot. If you're Tanya Blanding and you get shot dead in your house by a Michigan state trooper when you're 4 years old, you don't get to move from trauma to transcendence.
Right.
So that is the ones that remind us, even though the Saints of Winter are one-person grid academies and the Saints of Spring get to pure thrive despite, we have to work together to dismantle structural racism, structural sexism, economic bias. And in between, we fortify ourselves with the truth that joy is radical, that love is a strut. And when I say that, I keep mentioning that, I want to close with one thing of saying, I mentioned Angela Davis in her blues book. I love Bessie Smith. And when Bessie Smith had a wonderful song called Nashville Women Blues that Angela Davis calls out to, and it goes, those Nashville women, the way they strut, it ain't no bluff. And I think she's talking about Lil Hardin Armstrong, who's one of my she's a personal saint of mine. She's a personal inspiration to me.
Mm-hmm.
Lil Hardin Armstrong went to FIS for 3 years. She'll become the most important songwriter maybe America's ever seen. None of you've ever heard of her. She had a #1 on Ray Charles the year I was born. She had her last #1 after her death on Ringo Starr. She wrote Struttin' with Some Barbecue, one of the biggest jazz standards. She played on Blue Yodel #9.
Wow.
Have you ever heard of Lil Hardin?
No, no, I have not.
And that is what I need to call to. So.
And Alice, unlike Harlem, Black Bottom doesn't exist anymore.
It has been, there was something, and I talk about this in the novel, Negro removal masquerading as urban renewal.
Right, you have this vibrant neighborhood, this vibrant community, more than a neighborhood, of all of these businesses. You said 14 Black hospitals. And I can only imagine what else existed there in its heyday, and it doesn't exist anymore.
And at one point, depending on how you look at it, 80% Black home ownership. So
wow.
This world has changed. And the Gotham Hotel doesn't exist anymore. One of the things, as I said, I'm a novelist and I write about art an audience, even in my novels. I have novels that speak to other novels, to other art forms. I'm interested in art's ability to renew the self, to restore the self, and to restore communities. The Gotham Hotel was razed to the ground.
Wow.
But it rises in the pages of the novel in some significant ways. And at the same time, it is also true the Gotham Hotel is razed to the ground. Those are both true. And art restores our ability to know the Gotham Hotel in a different way.
So we have a winner for this final contest. CLH is the winner, and CLH will win a cocktail named Funhouse Mirror. It is Maxine Powell's cocktail. She's the patron saint of charmers, the masked, and the unmasked. Before we go, we're going to end with, we're going to show your cards on the video that you sent to the Ragtime Music. But before that, who plays Ziggy Johnson in the movie?
That's a very, very, very good question. We don't know yet. We don't know. And is it a movie or does it get to be a TV show? Who knows? What I know is I have written a novel. I spent 10 years writing that novel, and it is a love letter to the city where I was born. It's a love letter to Black creativity and Black culture. It's a love letter to Black audience and art. Its focus stays on Black people and Black culture.
Alice, thank you so much. We're going to end on your video, and we really appreciate this conversation with you. It went on longer than most of our conversations, but most of the people are still here, so it was compelling.
Yes, and what I love is there are so many great Black actors, and it'll be a wonderful Black actor.
Okay.
Yes. And before we go over to the slides, we want to be sure that we remind everyone to come back and join us next week for our conversation with Essence Editor-at-Large, Mickey Taylor, who will be discussing her new memoir, Force of Beauty. So thank you, Alice Randall.
Thank you. Love is the strut and joy is radical.
Yes, indeed. Everybody hang on so you can see the video before you file out. And thank you for joining us. Thanks, Alice. Good night, everyone.